This is really exciting. We're going to cover two topics tonight. The first one is on leaseback programs. It'll be leaseback programs in general, sprinkled with a little bit of Aviation Adventures specific leaseback information towards the end of the briefing. I do want to let you know up front, and I'll try to remember to do it also at the end of the briefing, that we do have two more follow-on speak outs coordinated with Smokehouse Pilots Group. Tuesday the 28th, also at 7 o'clock, we'll be sending out the invite for the new aircraft owner representatives. And the first two up are going to be Cirrus and Diamond. They'll be presenting 45 minutes each. And then on the 5th of May, we've got Piper leading off at 7 o'clock, and then Beechcraft and Cessna following behind. So if you've got any interest in seeing what the new product line, seeing what the representatives from Cirrus, Diamond, Cessna, Beech, and Piper have to say, then please join us once again on the next two Tuesdays. Okay, a couple of reasons to buy aircraft. If the aircraft that you're renting or have available to you to rent aren't quite the airplane that you want, then you can get into the game and be a factor in determining the kind of airplane that you want based on type, size, avionics, speed, everything else. Depending on how much you fly, and that break-even point tends to be about 100 hours a year, it could be cheaper than renting. But there's some overhead things that go along with owning an aircraft outright. Until 2024, we've got bonus depreciation that Congress has enacted. So if you've had a particularly good year or you're going to have a particularly good year in making money, then you can depreciate 100% of the cost of a newly acquired airplane, and that's new or used in the current tax year. As far as most flight schools are concerned, if you've got an aircraft leased back to a flight school, you don't have to worry about extended trip charges, so that if you've got an airplane, you're going to Charlottesville for the week, they're not going to charge you for that. There's always pride of ownership, and then the ability to tell your friends, hey, you see that beautiful thing sitting on the ramp over there? I own that. So why lease it back? There's a number of great reasons to lease back an airplane. Starting with, you can get an airplane that's newer, a little faster, and maybe just a bit bigger. So with all that, you can you can do that by letting other pilots help pay for your plane. And by putting it on lease back, then the money that you make every month on that airplane goes towards paying it off, and you end up with a paid off airplane at the end of the day if you choose to finance it. As we said, by leasing it back, there's some definite tax benefits. The IRS looks at it as a capital asset that you're able to depreciate, use accelerated depreciation, and also now for a little bit of time until 2024, we've got the bonus depreciation. One of the big advantages is you get no-cost aircraft management. So why do you need somebody to help manage your airplane? You can request that a flight school help you in choosing the airplane, help get involved in the purchase process to make sure that you select the right airplane. We're going to go into that a little bit at the end of this briefing. There's a lot of help that can be had with scheduled and unscheduled maintenance. Scheduled is the annuals, the 100 hours. The ELT inspections, the pedostatic inspections, transponder inspections, all those. So if you look at the landscape on general aviation maintenance opportunities that we've got in the DC area, they're not quite as prevalent as they were 4, 5, 6 years ago. And it almost always involves taking your airplane from the airfield that it's based and then getting it back. So flight schools are very good at doing that. They do that routinely. They have airplanes in training going back and forth, usually to the airfields that the desired maintenance facilities are at. So they're also good at doing things like tracking airworthiness directives, keeping track and scheduling, getting the airplane to annuals, 100 hours, doing those kind of things. If you're a first-time aircraft owner, you'll quickly realize that there is a lot more involved in tracking the airworthiness of an aircraft than there is in your car, where you just have to take it once a year to go get the inspection done. There's a lot more to track, and so having a flight school with an organized way of doing that, if you don't have it all organized and are tracking it yourself, for the first year or two, it's kind of fun. After that, it's not so much fun. And going out once a month, every 28 days to swap out databases. So I was standing out on the ramp a couple of weeks ago before the shutdown with Ramon Smeltz, our FSDO inspector. And I said, Ramon, how many of these airplanes out here do you think, if you were to take a little bit of a look at them, you would find airworthy? And he said, probably none of them. They're all most likely going to be unairworthy in one way or another. He said, except for the aircraft that are on the line with the better flight schools. So the flight schools do a better job because they have the FAA looking over their shoulder more frequently. So it is a better way to keep your airplane legally airworthy. So what about, how does our Lease Back program work? Just going to hit the numbers real quick. It's pretty standard in the industry. It's an 80-20 split. That means that for all the revenue that your aircraft generates, you get 80% of it, we keep 20% of it. So what do? For those of you who are familiar with Aviation Adventures, you know, one of the first things that we do with our 20% is give 10% of it back to the people that are renting the airplane. So really the margin isn't quite as lucrative as it seems right there. We have itemized statements that are sent out monthly. They're sent out on the 20th, and those statements and the payment, most people have direct deposit to someplace, but if not, there's a hard check that goes out, and we are religious about being on time with those payments. So the owner bears the maintenance expenses. We have 9 approved shops that we use, to include our one mechanic shop that's in-house. If the owner has a preference of where to take the aircraft, that's perfectly fine. We'll abide by that preference. But and if they're looking for recommendations on where to take the aircraft, every shop is just a little bit different. For those of you who've had airplanes, you know that. Some of them are more expensive, less expensive, more detailed, less detailed, specialize in one type of aircraft or another. So there are good reasons to getting a relationship established with a shop. But it's also good to have another set of eyes look at the aircraft every once in a while. And we try to do that at least once a year. We try to get it to one of the shops, either our shop or Westside Aviation has been doing a great job on the field at Manassas. All the scheduling is done through MyFBO. One of the common first questions that new aircraft owners, people considering getting into leaseback have is, do I get preference on scheduling with my airplane? The answer is no. It's done first come, first serve through MyFBO. Now, there is a caveat to that in that most of the time that the airplane is being used for training, it's only scheduled 3, maybe 4 weeks out. When you know it's your airplane that you want to fly on a particular trip, you tend to schedule farther out than that. We have no problem if there's one person that's got your airplane scheduled for one instructional flight or one shorter flight, and you're planning on taking your aircraft on a longer trip. No problem in reaching out to that person and saying, hey, would you mind switching? And you may be already doing that sometimes as a renter, but there's no problem doing that. We try to not get involved in that because we don't want it viewed as Aviation Adventures is kicking you out of that airplane. It works better at the more organic level that if we've got the owner or a renter that asks if they would mind scheduling, and most people are very understanding of that.
Hey, Bob, I got 2 questions for you. On the owner's
Sure.
choice, if we don't care, that's okay too? You guys will decide?
That's right. Yeah, we have some that we more frequently use, and it's also based on location, Dan. That the Leesburg airplanes tend to go to Winchester and Hagerstown more frequently. They sometimes go to Culpeper. The Manassas and Warrenton airplanes tend to go to Manassas, Warrenton, and Culpeper, and the as do the Stafford airplanes. So if the owner doesn't have an expressed preference for where the airplane goes for maintenance, some do, some don't, then we go to wherever it can get taken care of the quickest.
And second question, I rent through MyFBO, I pay the normal fee as a renter?
No, you just pay the 80%. The 20% is you don't pay us. We used to have a $7 an hour fee, and we took that away.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. So the tie downs are paid. Those are deducted. Usually, some of the leaseback owners have direct arrangements with the airport, but some of them, or most of them, are done through us, and so it's just a direct pass through. The charges for the tie downs at Manassas are $80 a month for a single, $90 for a twin. Leesburg, $120 for, it doesn't matter what it is. $72 at Warrenton, and Stafford at $65 a month. And so that's just deducted on the statement that comes to the leaseback owner monthly. Fuel is really easy. You just leave a credit card wherever the aircraft is based, and then that's billed directly to you. We don't get involved with the fuel except for when the aircraft is on a road trip, when it's away, or anytime that that fuel is purchased for that aircraft, not at the home base. And this works 100% to the owner's advantage, because we cap the reimbursement rate to be pretty similar to the rate that we pay for fuel currently. That had been $5.50 a gallon. Recently, because of the surplus of fuel, the fuel rate, just like auto fuel, has gone down. Aircraft fuel has gone down recently. I think Warrenton was recently advertising that they were under $4 a gallon. So, but that's going to be a temporary thing. So if somebody purchases fuel away from the home base and it's not charged to you, we will reimburse them up to the max rate. So if the established rate, the maximum reimbursable rate is $5.50, and they buy fuel for $4 a gallon, then all we do is reimburse them at $4 a gallon, and that's all we charge the leaseback owner for. Again, it's a pass through. We make nothing on it. If they go to Teterboro and decide that they want to pay $8.50 a gallon, then they pay $8.50 a gallon. We pay them $5.50 in reimbursement per gallon, and then that's all you end up paying. So it only you're paying the rate at where the aircraft is based up to a maximum of $5.50, except for when the airplane goes away, and then there's only the possibility that you're going to pay less than that. So that's geared in the owner's favor. As far as insurance, we have fleet insurance. We've been with the same company since 2002. When we first started with them, when we were a smaller flight school, it was not as beneficial as it is right now. The smaller flight schools, it's very common practice with insurance companies to either pay a year's worth of premium in advance or to finance it, and you end up paying 2 months in advance and then financing the other 10 months at a not very favorable financing rate. Insurance companies don't like playing bank. So right now, the way it is with us is we pay no deposit, no interest, and we pay 1 month in arrears. So the way it actually works, it's called a daily recorder. It was initially set up for aircraft brokers that had a very transient operation, but ours is large enough that they allow us to do the same thing. Every month, we report to them what aircraft we had on the previous month, and we tell them what premium we're going to pay.
Hey, Bob, Doug here. I got a question on that.
One more time, Doug.
Yeah, if you already have a year's insurance paid, would you just be double covered in this example?
I certainly wouldn't double cover in situations like that, Doug. You can usually go back and get a refund for the unused portion of your premium. I've never seen insurance companies balk at that. So, but it does need to be under our policy. So just an idea, for those that have had personal use aircraft before, these numbers are bigger because it's about 1.5 times the premium for instruction and rental, because number one, the aircraft are flown more and they're being used for training. So put those together, and the people that determine the rates at the insurance companies have determined that there is added risk to that. Now, this premium, it rolls the two parts of the insurance together. There's a liability coverage that covers any harm to the people or on the ground or in the aircraft, and any thing that the airplane may hit on the ground. And then the other part of it, the bigger part of the premium, is based on the hull value of the aircraft or the insured value. So we usually recommend that people insure the aircraft for about what they bought it for or what the current value of the airplane is. Some people try to over or under insure, and that really doesn't work out to anybody's benefit. So there's just an idea what our premiums are. Now, you may have read, AOPA has done some covering on this about the insurance market in the last couple of years has become what they call a hard market, which means it's not good for somebody buying aircraft insurance. And when it gets hard, there's two things that happen. One is the premiums go up, and the other is insurance in some cases, especially in specialty cases, becomes harder to find. So a couple of us do a little bit of contract flying for jet owners, and those guys have had a real tough time, especially the owner operators. They've just been squeezed out of the market, or their training requirements by the insurance company have been elevated quite a bit. So these numbers are bigger than what we've seen in previous years, and I would say that they're likely to go up maybe 1, 2, 3% in the next year. Then it's if it follows the normal cycle on aircraft insurance, then the market will start to soften. So other incidental expenses that you could expect are the little one, the customs decal, that's $27. Every year that there needs to be a new customs decal if the aircraft goes out of the country. Some aircraft owners say, I don't want my aircraft to go out of the country. Okay, we honor that, and it won't go out of the country. But what we do on the customs decal is the first renter that takes that aircraft out of the country in a calendar year gets to pay for the customs decal. And like I said, that's about $27. Now the radio station license also is required if the aircraft goes out of the country. That's back when Aero on the required documents used to have 2 R's, and that the second R was the radio station license. You get that from the FCC, and that's about $160, but it's good for 10 years. Because it's a little more expensive and covers such a long period of time, if the owner wants to allow their aircraft to go out of the country, and most do, then that is paid by the aircraft owner. Any landing fees or ATC fees in the States, that's usually going into some of the bigger airports. That's one of the ways that ATC restricts little airplanes from going into big airports, except for times like this where, hey, you want to go do touch and goes at LaGuardia? That's not a problem. But any other time, if there's fees, or Canada pays for all of their ATC fees. So if we have an airplane that's gone to Canada on a trip, then we let the renter know that when we get the bill for that, that's going to be passed along to the renter. So you don't end up paying that, the renter does. When we get back into preheat season, the owner pays for the first preheat of the day. That's we charge $25, about normally a little bit less than what the FBOs charge, but we charge $25 for the first one. If the renter wants the aircraft preheated later in the day, the renter pays for that. If we get extreme weather coming in, we were talking earlier about high winds. If we've got high winds, tornadoes, hail, anything like that, airport to airport, it's a little different situation on what the availability of hangars are. But usually the chiefs then, when we know that there's extreme weather coming in, we go to work, get on the phone, and start finding places to hangar the aircraft. Sometimes there's a charge with that. Sometimes there's not a charge. Again, that's based on the airport and the availability of hangaring. But if we do get your airplane into a hangar for extreme weather, then that is that fee. Normally, when we are charged, it's $35 to $75 a night.
Just out of curiosity, how often does that happen?
Maybe once or twice a year. Not too often, fortunately. And then the question came up earlier about the owner use. The owner just pays the 80% rate, and so it's there is no 20% fee when the owner uses the aircraft. Just to give you an idea, we put together a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that kind of gives you an idea of, this is for a 172. And this insurance is based on $100,000. So depending on what the year of the 172 is, that may be a little bit more or less insurance premium than would be needed. But this was set up for Stafford. So Stafford is 65 a month. That's 780 a year for tie downs. Fuel, this was based on most of the Stafford aircraft are carbureted, so they're burning typically 7 gallons an hour. Fuel's right now $5 gallons an hour, or $5 a gallon. And so they're burning about $35 worth of fuel. If you're at Leaseback in a R or S model that's burning 8 gallons an hour, fuel cost is going to go up a little bit. Here's where the numbers get just a little bit. We had to kind of massage these to make these work. One of the little known secrets in aviation that also work to the owner's benefit is that aircraft maintenance is done based on TAC hours, and the pilots pay for the aircraft based on Hobbs hours. For most normal operations, and it carries through from aircraft to aircraft, there's about a 1.3 to 1 ratio between Hobbs hours to TAC hours. So that means for every time that you need to pay for a 100-hour inspection that's done by the TAC, that you are realizing up to 130 hours of revenue. Okay, so based on that, we massaged these hourly rate numbers a little bit so the numbers would come out correct. So a typical flat charge for a 100-hour inspection is going to be about $1,600. So if you take 1.3 times 1,200, it comes out to about $1,600. So engine reserve, we typically, depending on which size engine, the engine rebuilder that we use will do a carbureted Cessna engine for about $1,900 or $19,000, and for a R or S model 172, it's going to be about $22,000, $23,000. So you need to have a little engine reserve going there so that you're ready when the engine needs overhauled. The other thing that works to our advantage there is that we have it written into our operation specifications, which are approved by the FAA, that we can exceed, and this is just for 141 operations, we can exceed the manufacturer's recommended time between overhaul by 20%. So most of the engines in the training airplanes are 2,000-hour TBO engines, which means that we can go to 2,400 hours between engine overhaul. And the reason that we can do that is because actually flight school life for an airplane is a pretty good life. They get run frequently. Airplanes like to operate. It keeps the engine lubricated. They're flown generally under the supervision of an instructor, so the engines are operated quite well, and they get their oil changed every 50 hours, which helps extend the life. So not very often do we end up replacing a lot of cylinders before we get to the 2,400 hours. We don't the airplane will generally get to 2,400 hours before we have reason to do a major overhaul earlier than that. So that makes those numbers work out as well as they can for the owner. Little avionics reserve there. Actually, we just had a lot of avionics upgrades going on in our aircraft. Uh, we had a lot of them done at the same time that ADS-B was installed, but radios do break. They do get obsolete, and it's not a bad idea to have a little avionics reserve going in there. The wild card in all of this is the general maintenance, and that's the money that goes to pay when something breaks, and that will generally come in. You could go for a year and not really have to dip into this much at all, but then uh, on one of these inspections, the 100-hour inspections, then something will be discovered that, hey, we really need to, there's a crack in the firewall someplace, which is not uncommon. We've needed to repair a couple of aircraft, not because of abuse. It's such a common thing that Cessna has an approved repair procedure for that it's right there where the battery box is hanging on the firewall. So that's when you would need to dip into that. But for the most part, that's not, that's just there as a big reserve. And that is a bigger number than even the amount for the 100-hour. Now, what we don't have in there is money set aside for the annual, because as a lease back aircraft in a flight school, we're doing 100 hours all the time. So if the airplane has been going to some place that doesn't have a mechanic with inspection authorization, an IA approved mechanic, then we make sure that if the airplane is coming into the zone that it could need an annual before the next 100-hour is due, we take it to a shop that can sign it off as an annual. So the goal, and we're pretty good about it, is not having to send an airplane for a dedicated annual, that it's all taken care of when it gets the 100-hour inspections. So the $3,000, that's our 20%. So I need to jump that over, but that's the 20%. So let's see. These columns need to slide over one. So for
$3,000 per hour, that's cool.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you. During pandemics, does the management fee and the insurance fee change at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. As soon as it was becoming possible that we were going to close, I was on the phone to our insurance company. All of our aircraft right now are in what's called a layup status. So that means if they don't fly for 30 days or more, that they have ground coverage only. So, but if they've flown within a 30-day period, then now, in talking to them, they said that's what it is right now. That's the stock answer, and that's without them going back to the insurance company now that we know a little bit more about what's involved with the COVID shutdowns, and they think that they're going to even get some relief off of that. Because the only flying we're doing right now is taking aircraft for maintenance. I've got one going tomorrow to Delaware for paint. We're doing things like that, and that's the only flying we're doing. So, and the insurance company, like I said, we've had an 18-year relationship with the insurance company, and we pay them a lot of money, and they like us. So,
Hey, Bob, quick question. You're talking about typically 172. Is there, or how do the numbers change with, say, a 172 or Piper versus a complex airplane?
those could be plugged right in here. So this is just based on the insured value of the aircraft, and that's an annual fee. The tie down is not going to change it, except at Manassas, it's based on whether it's a single or a twin. But That's location specific. The fuel burn, you could plug your own fuel burn or your fuel expense right in there, Doug. If you've got a good view, a maintenance history of your aircraft, and can refine and massage this number based on, you may not have had 100 hours being done on it till now. You've had annuals. So the annuals are going to be more expensive because you're talking about, you know, a 1 year period of time versus a month. Engine reserve should be about the same. Avionics reserve should be about the same. General maintenance, again, if you've got a track record on your airplane, that's going to really help you shape those numbers up. And the school's 20% is not going to change.
I should really ask, from a school perspective, what's the demand signal, you know, from 172 by Piper versus a complex airplane?
I'm sorry, what is the what, Doug?
How often is a complex airplane flown by a 172 from a schoolhouse perspective?
Yeah, that changed with the change in the ruling a couple years ago from the FAA that used to be that complex aircraft time was required for pilots seeking a commercial single engine rating and CFIs going for their initial CFI rating. When the FAA eliminated those requirements and allowed those requirements to be done in a technically advanced aircraft, then that reduced by a significant amount the demand for a complex airplane. We had 2 Arrows at one time. We went down to 1. We were scrambling trying to get a second one. And then the FAA changed the ruling, and you know, we could use another complex single. We could certainly put use on it, but it's not at the top of my Christmas list. So the takeaway down here is that someplace around between 200 and 300 hours a year, pretty well around the 250 hour mark, with a Cessna 172 at Stafford, it is you switch over from red numbers to green numbers, and so 250 hours a year works out to be about 20 hours a month, and ballpark. So at other locations, that number may be a little bit higher, closer to the 30 mark with a 172. Now, the farther you get from the core training aircraft, in this case 172, then that profitability mark is going to, changeover point is going to slide to the right. Okay, so if you've got John had a Cessna 400 as his backdrop there. If you've got a Cessna 400, that may turn out to be 35 hours a month that you need to put on that to break even. And then, then the question sometimes pops up, well, why don't we just jack the rate up? I didn't remember much from my economics class, but one of the things is the Laffer curve. And the more you raise the rate, the less hours the airplane's going to fly. So you really need to find that balance point in there that maximizes finds that point that's the optimum point for what we're charging for the aircraft versus how much it's going to fly. And that's the point that we're looking for there.
You may have said, how do you pick the hourly rate? How's the
we do it in, we let you run that spreadsheet and run it with the best numbers, and we'll provide whatever input that we can help you with. And then generally we run it for a reduced fee for 2 months so that it allows, if it's a new aircraft type, if it's a 172.
I'm in.
Okay, if it's a 172, not a lot of people need to get aircraft checkouts. If it's a new type, then we'll normally run a 2-month introductory rate to allow people to get checked out in it, to establish a following for the airplane, and then we'll bump it up. Usually it's a $10 an hour difference. Okay, all good questions. Couple of other benefits to leasing back, at least these are our policies. So as we said before, if the aircraft is being used for family use, either your personal use, or if you've got a spouse or a child that is learning to fly, if it's a direct family member, then we don't charge the 20% school part of the rate. If you've got the aircraft on an overnight trip and it exceeds the minimum time that we have, and that policy is there to protect the leaseback owners, we don't feel a big need to protect the leaseback owners from themselves. They realize fully that if they have their airplane on an extended trip but not putting very many hours on it, that they usually realize the financial implications of that. So they've just got a decision to make whether they want to take their own airplane and take it out of service where it's not making money, or take it on the trip knowing that that's what's going on. Like other bigger operations that establish relationships with vendors for maintenance, for parts, for fuel, things like that, we get discounts with a lot of these places. We get preferred rates. And right now, as important as anything else in the maintenance world, the places that people can have their general aviation aircraft maintained in the Northern Virginia area is going down. And so as much as anything, it's not only the preferred rates, but it's we get priority in when we call up and say, hey, we really need to get this aircraft in for a service. They will move other aircraft around and prioritize ours. So that is extremely important. We were running into situations last year that we were spending too much time in line waiting to get in, and I've had discussions with all of the maintenance facilities about how to get our aircraft in a very timely manner. I've been running a flight school for 31 years. I've owned an aircraft for 31 years. And Aviation Adventures currently owns 17 airplanes. So there's a lot of experience buying, leasing back, and operating aircraft. And all of that is available to our lease. All of that advice and help is available to all of our leaseback owners. All of our leaseback owners get a free flight review that's done by the chief instructor at each location when your 2 years comes up. And then every year we have an appreciation dinner in January. That's for all the staff at Aviation Adventures along with the leaseback owners. And it's normally a pretty nice catered dinner, open bar, and we got some prizes that we give away there.
Hey, Bob, a quick question for you. In the 31 years, when people have pulled out of the leaseback program, what are some of the reasons they're pulling out for? In other words, what are some of the drawbacks that they're citing?
Sure. Number one, they move away. This is a transient area. So the biggest reason is that they move. If I had to look back to see what number two is, I'd have to think about it, Dan. I can't give you an answer on what number two. Number one's definitely that they move. I had, one of them was his daughter was going to college and he needed to cash out the airplane.
I was just looking on the drawback side, if there's anything. Obviously, if you don't meet your hours per month.
Exactly. Well, that's a great segue into the next slide. Thank you. The um, when leaseback owners come on with us, it's a business relationship. And we both have the same goal, and that is to put hours on your airplane. And so it doesn't do us any good to have an airplane that isn't accruing hours. It doesn't do you any good. So we both have the same objective. And the more your airplane flies, the more money you give us make. So it's built on a strong relationship like that. I said we've been in operation for 31 years. We do have full-time professional management. So the and not part-time managers. We've currently got 4. We're working on location number 5. I was just there yesterday. We're to start up operations at Winchester. We do have some aircraft lined up to start us at Winchester, but we need more. We've never missed a payment to our staff or our leaseback owners. And as we talked before, we leverage our buying power and our reputation in the area. And then the other thing is that I talked to somebody who had a leaseback aircraft with another flight school. He said that he was really impressed at the difference between how our instructors and pilots cared for aircraft versus the other school. So we do teach them that. That's why the aircraft have covers. We teach them to clean the windscreens. Right now, since the COVID stuff, all of our aircraft, as of tomorrow, the interiors will have been professionally steam cleaned, and we have them. We have a schedule for washing the aircraft and keeping them looking good. So,
The location of the aircraft.
I'm sorry.
What about airplanes with steam gauges?
Who decides the location of the aircraft once
If you have a strong preference, great. That's where it goes. If we'll balance the aircraft and we'll take a look at where it could best be utilized. I'll tell you, it'll fly more here than here, but the choice is yours. If most of the time, leaseback owners that are pilots like to have their aircraft based at the airport that they're most comfortable flying from.
Thank you.
Okay. So what aircraft do we need? Obviously, most of our training fleet is 172s. We like them to be at least 1975 or newer. G1000s, always. The G1000 aircraft are always rent well wherever they're at.
Hey, Bob, real quick.
Yeah.
This is Gabe. I just wanted to see if you can mute everybody for us. We got a bunch of background noise going on. So you should be able to mute all at once, or mute the one that's speaking. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to let you know. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, this set itself up with so many people on it, set itself up differently, and I
think you're good now. I think you're all
okay.
set now.
All right.
Cool. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, so we mostly at Leesburg we could use a 182. Again, preferably G1000. DA40, we've got 1 at Leesburg right now. We could use 1 or 2 at Manassas. SR20, SR22s, Leesburg and Manassas. And we've tried to get a lot of the King equipment out of the aircraft because we found that people were flying mostly basing their choice of aircraft on the avionics more than the airframe. And people just enjoy flying the Garmin equipment more. So what's so important about right now? Well, there's a lot of things that are happening right now. Before the COVID crisis hit, we had very much a seller's market going on. And in a couple of weeks' time, that flipped to a buyer's market. It used to be you couldn't find a 172, and when you did, you were paying premium prices for it. Now you've got there are 172s available with sellers that are willing to work with you on the price. So a lot of things have driven the aircraft availability, the economic uncertainty of right now. New aircraft manufacturers have shut down their aircraft manufacturing plants because of the virus. So people just aren't very much in an aircraft buying mood. But like anything else, when the price is low, that's the time to buy. And so there are flight schools that have been closing their doors. And I was talking to the manager last night of Liberty, and he says he's getting notices from some of the flight schools around the country that they're going to close their doors because of this, and they have no plans to reopen. So all of those flight schools have aircraft in their fleet that are going to need to go somewhere. Interest rates are pretty low right now. They're hovering in the 3% area. Bonus depreciation is there. It's still going to be around till 2024. And one concern has been the demand for pilot training. That is going to bounce back because a lot of the pilots that are retiring right now out of the major airlines are just taking early retirement. So all those folks are, as flying comes back, all those folks are going to need to be replaced. So that's pretty much what I've got on the aircraft lease back part of things. Does anyone have any questions about the lease back process or in general, or how we work it at Aviation Adventures?
I had a quick question on something you just mentioned, and that was the bonus depreciation. I'm assuming you're talking about tax incentives wise.
Correct.
Okay.
That is. So that's huge. If you had or if you think that 2020 is going to be a great year, then buying an airplane is a way to defer that that income. So if, for instance, if you bought a $100,000 aircraft, then on the front side of your tax form, that's $100,000 that comes right off of your taxable income for this year. Now, you got to pay the piper sometime, and so the way that it works best is then if you can if you hold on to that aircraft until a period of time when your income isn't quite as high as it is right now, and sell that aircraft when you're at a lower tax rate, then you're going to the capital gains tax that you have to pay is going to be less than the positive effect of buying that airplane has right now.
So yeah, and so you're going to be taxed at the sale. Now, I guess, but technically, as if you ever listen to any of Tom Wheelwright stuff, you could, continue to, upgrade aircraft. Let's say if your aircraft's all depreciated out, and then
Absolutely.
at the end, when you decide, hey, I'm not flying anymore, or maybe you lose your medical, something like that, that might be a great time to actually do a lease back to a school, for an aircraft, if you have a suitable aircraft for that, because then you're not creating a taxable event.
That's true. And in fact, Cessna tried working that program for quite a while, that they would sell somebody a new airplane, have them hold on to it for 2 years in a flight school, making money, deferring expense, whatever you want to call it. And then 2 years later, when the warranty ran out, they'd flip it and buy another new airplane. And so that kept pushing the capital gains tax down the road, with the whole idea of pushing it into your retirement years when you're in a lesser tax bracket.
Yeah, and I apologize. I missed almost your whole presentation because I couldn't get in. There was, I guess, too many people wanting to get on the get on to watch this stuff. But one of the things I just learned recently, I know the AOPA. If you go and you click on financing, typically they're going to, in general, tell you you're looking for a 700 credit score, and talk about putting 20% down. And you touched on some of that stuff here towards the end. I spoke with a guy yesterday who said he does a lot of deals with no money down. And then he's also, the banks that he's working with are looking for a 665, so 665 credit score. So,
Right.
which I found interesting. And you'll see, I guess a lot of people are doing 25-year finances now too.
Wow.
Yeah. So Van Borels is advertising that. And I think this guy in particular had that on his website as well. So, and claims he gets it approved.
Awesome. I mean,
as well.
It's really different, and it's cheap money. I mean, what was the loan rate, Tim?
I don't remember if he had on his side. I know Van Bortles was advertising 299.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And at 25 years, I can't imagine you have a $300 or $400 payment on a $100,000 aircraft.
Right.
So yeah, that's a great option.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, this is Nima.
Great question. Great observation. Any other questions?
Hey, Bob, this is Nima. Is it possible for you to give us a sense of like what a average plane would cost us?
What an average plane, well, that's what the cost of the aircraft is going to be, all over the map at what you want. And especially it's dynamic right now because while the price of aircraft was way up with it being a seller's market, the price of those aircraft are coming down. At the lower end, you can get an older Warrior or a low wing 150 or 180 horse Piper fixed gear for in the $50,000-$60,000 range, depending on how nicely equipped you want it. 172s are generally going in the 70,000-80,000 for the carbureted ones. They're going to be up in the 150, 160, 170 area. And I haven't done a lot of research on it lately, so don't take me to the bank on these numbers. But I think that's pretty much in the ballpark.
But so if we're planning on something that's kind of like some of the 172s that we've got in Leaseback with the G1000 and everything else, you're thinking something in around that 200,000 range is going to be pretty common or pretty fair?
200,000 you can get, especially right now, you can get a pretty nicely, a reasonably newer G1000 Skyhawk. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Bob, another quick question. Just what is your best guess of how many hours per month the 172s at Manassas are putting on them? How many hours are they renting per month?
Yeah, those numbers came in right before the meeting. I didn't have a chance to put a slide up for it. The numbers that I've got, Leesburg's 172s are averaging 35 to 50 a month, Manassas 50 to 80, and Stafford 47 to 65.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I got one here.
Yes, Bob. Go ahead.
How would you convince a skeptical spouse who sees airline pilots being furloughed and people are basically saying the pilot shortage is over, that flight training is going to come back?
The best thing to do is go out and find articles on just find things in publications, and there's more and more being published now. There's not a lot that's really the pre-COVID virus stuff is not extremely relevant anymore, but the stuff, there is starting to be information written about what the pilot demand is going to be like in post-COVID.
Okay,
Bob,
Bob, I got a question. Where do you need a 172 right now, or what's better, a 172 or a Cherokee?
The 172s tend to do better. And that's the most commonality that we've got across the fleet. We have 2 Cherokee Piper Archers at Manassas, and they do fine. And actually, we had one for a while, and then what's happened is that whenever you have just one of an aircraft type, people tend to not use that as a trainer because it doesn't have a backup. If somebody else schedules the airplane, if the aircraft goes on a trip, goes down for maintenance, they're left without a training airplane. As soon as there's at least 2 of that aircraft type that they could switch back and forth from, then the usage on both aircraft goes up exponentially. So it's always good to have 2 of any kind of aircraft that you've got.
Okay.
Hey, Bob.
And where's the greatest demand right now for the planes right now?
If it's a like an R
172.
model 172, Stafford could use one. Jim Stover's doing a great job down there and really developing a strong program at Stafford. And then Manassas and Leesburg could always use another 172. I would say Stafford, Manassas, and Leesburg in that order.
And Bob, with an older 172 that's got steam gauges, what would you recommend upgrading the avionics to?
What we're pushing for now is the Garmin Glass. And so if it's an older airplane, we're tending to put G5s in it and then backing it up with either if it's got a Garmin 430 or 530 in it, great. If not, then backing that up with either a 650 or 750 touchscreen GPS. And that's a great combination. If you're looking to update it just a little bit more, then what you can do is go to the G3 Touch. Now the G3 Touch is 18,000 installed by itself, but what a difference it makes in the aircraft. The first one of those that we have is 144 Mike Echo at Leesburg, and it's as soon as it came back with that panel, it's got quite a following.
Yeah, I've flown that one. It's nice.
Yes. Yeah, people
Is that
really
rental
like.
more expensive?
Yeah, we'll price it based on the avionics package that it has. So that's the thing that usually differentiates the rental rates for the different 172s that we have is what avionics package it has. So the ones that have the G500 dual screen display, PFD, MFD, together with the 650 is they go for the same rate as the G1000s do. And then the ones with the steam gauges or the G5s they go for a lesser rate. And those are usually, we're trying to get most of the fleet standardized into the carbureted Cessnas with the G5s and the fuel injected ones with the 500s or the G3 Touch.
Bob, is there anything you can touch on? Is there for insurance? If you're the owner, does your insurance rates go up, or are they about the same no matter what?
For just a privately owned aircraft, not on leaseback?
No, on leaseback.
No, on leaseback, one of the things that the insurance company requires is that if it has an owner that flies while the aircraft is on leaseback, they like to see a pilot history form for all of the aircraft owners. But that doesn't affect the insurance premium at all. In fact, our insurance premiums are the same rate. It's all based on insured value, no matter what the type of aircraft is. And then, for a while we had a aerobatic super decathlon on the line, and its rate was the same rate of insurance premium as for 172.
Evening, Bob. Just to go off of what Jim said, and also a comment that's going around in the chat, which someone must be thinking the same thing I am. When it comes to Cirrus SR20s or SR22s, what are your thoughts on whether you want the Garmin kit in there versus the Avidyne?
Yeah, that's a good question. That comes up quite a bit. Definitely the Garmin. For a number of reasons. Whenever you would go to sell that aircraft, I think you're going to see that the value of the Avidyne systems is going to drop away a lot faster on used aircraft than it is with the G1000 aircraft. So, today, the market today in this area, they love G1000. And that's the package that they know. You'll have a certain number of people that will just choose to not get checked out in a Avidyne airplane because they don't want to learn a new avionics system.
Now, when you enter a leaseback, what's the average contract length?
Ours goes 12 months, and then it's automatically renewable month to month, and either party can exit the contract with a 30-day notice.
Any demand for tailwheel aircraft, or is it finding an instructor to teach in those difficult?
I'm sorry, John, say again.
Is there any demand for tailwheel?
There is. It's kind of a specialized thing. There's definitely people that like them, but you've got to keep instructors proficient in them too, and that's not all instructors. It's a specialty thing. Yeah. All right.
Sorry, one more question before I could ask 10 questions, but I'll just ask the easy one first. I think you're recording this. Is there going to be a way to view the recording for all those people who came in late or didn't make it?
I got to find somebody below the age of 30. It is being recorded. I got to find somebody under 30 to help me get that put out to you. I have it being recorded to my computer here. So let's press on. We'll have time for more questions for anybody that wants to stick around afterwards. Just a few tips for people who might be buying their first used aircraft. The first thing to consider as you get into an aircraft purchase is, what's the mission? What do you want the airplane to do? And then the first thing right up front is, what do you want it to do versus what do you need it to do. And it's a good idea to separate those into what you want and what you need when you look at each of these. So the first thing is, how many seats do you need? And that's going to be typically driven by how big your family is. And it's good advice. I see a lot of people that have 6-seat aircraft, and they're flying around a lot of times with 5 empty seats. And so if you're going to be doing a lot of flying by yourself, or it's just your family that's, you and your wife, 1 or 2 kids, then you may not need fully a 6 or 7-seat aircraft. If you've got a bigger family or planning to have a bigger family, then sure, go ahead. Go ahead and get that 6-seat aircraft. Because remember, one of the insurance factors is based on how many seats are in the aircraft. So you pay more on insurance, not just based on the hull value, but also on the insurance company looks at it as additional liability, the more people that are on board. Then what kind of range do you need? And that's based on the shortest bladder range of anybody that's in the airplane. So it doesn't do a lot of good to have this thing all equipped with long-range tanks that can go for 10 hours if the people on board have got 2 or 3 hour bladders. So if you've got small kids, they tend to not like to, just like in the car, you hear a lot of, are we there yet? And so you got to factor that in too. Then take a look at what kind of speed do you need? What kind of speed do you want? And then that kind of drives you into, do you want to turbocharge, or do you want or need turbocharging, de-icing, or a retractable airplane, anything with any special use. If you're going to be doing some longer trips, then an autopilot's a great thing to have. And most airplanes anymore do come with autopilots. So then after you know what planes that what you want in the plane, based on that mission, start narrowing your search down to what specific aircraft types you want to consider. If it's a 6-seat, then your list starts to get, it's pretty short. You've got the A36 Bonanzas, you've got the Piper Cherokee 6, Saratoga, Lance, whatever variant there. If it's 4-place airplane, there's a lot of those. So just based on the speed, the load haul capabilities, all that, just get it down to a list of aircraft types. Then build yourself a little spreadsheet like the one that I showed you in the Lease Back briefing of what are your acquisition costs, and then also your operating costs for each of the make and models that you're looking at. And then take a look at, start to narrow your list down a little bit further with that, and then what aircraft do meet the budget. So then where do you go to shop? Well, you got Trade a Plane that's now only online. Controller.com is a pretty similar kind of publication. If you fly around to different airports, just about all of them have a bulletin board that have different aircraft for sale. We do have, as I mentioned earlier, different flight schools that have gone out of business. If you got to be quick on those usually get snapped up pretty quick. And then just ask around the airport. You can just walk around the tie downs, look at which airplanes don't seem to be flying much, find the owner and give them a call. So just ask around to different people that hang around the airport a lot. They usually know what airplanes are coming up for sale. Big recommendation here. It's real easy to get drawn in by a low price on an airplane, and then you look at the panel that's all ancient technology, and you go, well, yeah, I can put this and this and this and this in it. It's kind of like buying a new versus a used car. When you buy that new car and you drive it off the lot, the value of it just went down 30%. Well, the same thing is true with avionics. So let somebody else pay for that new avionics. Shop around and find the avionics suite that's pretty close to what you want in the airplane, and let somebody else take that hit on the installation of new equipment. So that's a big way to save money. I don't consider, personally, some people are different about it. If it's not major damage history, then take a look at how the airplane's been repaired. Take a look at the logbooks. If it's been documented properly, then I use that as a negotiating point in closing the deal. If it's been repaired properly, you're not going to have a problem because of the damage history down the road generally. I never have. If it's a high time engine, if you've got the engine reserve to do it, that's usually okay. Our engine guy does a great job for a great price for us. And then when you get the engine, you buy the airplane, get the engine overhauled, you know exactly what you got. There's not any hidden problems in that engine. One of the things to be careful of is airplanes that have sat too long, especially engines that haven't been run very much. Then be very careful of that because rust sets in. Airplanes like to fly. They like to have air flowing through them. If they sit, that's equally as bad as if they're just beat up in the way that they're operating. Then you can do a price comparison. VREF is out there online. You can take a look at, plug in the particulars of the airplane that you're looking at, Trade a Plane, and controller.com. Then it gets down to the deal. Just like in negotiating for cars, you don't want to pay what they're asking. They've got a number that they're probably going to settle on. If you think the airplane is really overpriced, then you could, offer them, less than 20% off. But if you're not comfortable negotiating, look up the TV show American Pickers and just watch it in action there. Not a lot of Americans are comfortable negotiating, but it is done. So use the damage history, the time for any inspection, whether it's got ADS-B or not, relocation fee. Use that in negotiating the price down, and then it always helps to let the seller know that there's another airplane that you're considering, and you're trying to make a decision between his airplane and another one, and that's sometimes helpful. The second biggest piece of advice: always have a pre-purchase inspection. Don't go without the pre-purchase inspection. Do not use the seller's normal shop mechanic. Not the person that's been maintaining it all along, because his loyalty is to the seller. So you want to have somebody that hasn't seen the airplane before, that's going to take an objective look. It can be done if the airplane's coming up for an annual. You can have the pre-purchase inspection done together with the annual and agree to share the cost with the seller. You want to make absolutely sure that you get a recent AD compliance listing, so that you know that every AD on that airplane has been complied with, and that that AD listing will point you to where in the logbooks that has been done. You want to draft up a sales agreement with a conditional out for you, so that if there is something, a deal breaker with the airplane, that any money that you may have on escrow, you can get back out. That you're going to make sure that you don't get hurt on that deal. After the sale, if you're going there to close the deal where the airplane is at, or where the pre-purchase inspection is going to be conducted, want to make sure you got a way to get the airplane back, but don't get locked into that. Don't let that drive you to complete the deal because you need a ride back. Now, there's even if you've had a pre-purchase inspection, there's going to be things that aren't picked up there. that will likely be picked up in the first couple of inspections that you do after, whether they're annuals or 100 hours. So make sure you've got a little bit in the budget for what you don't know. And then, very importantly, enjoy it. It's a special event when you buy an airplane and have a great time with it. So that's about what we got for the second part of the briefing. Any questions on that?
Let's say somebody's going to buy a plane and it is intending to put it on leaseback with you. In terms of insurance and that sort of thing, you're going to fly somewhere, you're going to look at a plane, you're going to pick it up and fly it home, and obviously you want to have insurance coverage during that time. Is that something they work out with you ahead of time, or do you say go get your own insurance policy and we'll fix that later?
If it's on leaseback with us, like I said, we do it in arrears, and so we do. Now, with that said, we notify the insurance company that we have a new aircraft coming on. We're not obligated to, but we do. And so we've got a real short little form that takes down the essential information for the airplane, the serial number, the tail number, your information, and then what you want the airplane insured as, the insured value of the airplane, which is going to be normally, what you paid for it. So then we turn that into the insurance company, and then the following month, it's we're on what's called a daily rate. So the insurance premium is a little bit different month to month based on the days in the month, and so then that's calculated. And that's just the insurance. Your part of the insurance premium is just deducted from your monthly statement. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions?
Hey, Bob, what are your thoughts on an RG model 172 as far as usability for the lease back?
We've never had one on the line. The Cutlass, the 172 RGs, what back in the day when Piper and Cessna were really going at it, and they were Piper had the Piper Arrow and the Cessna had the Cutlass, somewhat similar airplanes. The Cutlass, because of the high wing design on the 172s, had always been more problematic than the Cessna or than the Pipers, because if you got there's more points of failure in that system than there are in the backup system for the Piper, which is you press a little lever, it releases the fluid, the gear falls down, and it drops into place. Where the Cessna bird leg gear design has to swing forward into the slipstream, and so yeah, they've got a provision if the pump motor fails that you can pump it down, but if something happened and you leak all the fluid in the system out, you're in for a belly landing. So because of that, flight schools primarily and individual owners tended to favor the Piper Arrows. So now, would we take one? Sure, but the Piper Arrows are tended to be preferred. Any other questions?
Hey, Bob, what are the difference in the, because I know when you buy an airplane, you have taxes are due immediately and also property taxes based upon where it's hangared. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, when you purchase the aircraft, there's a 2% sales tax. And they used to be a little more lax than they are right now in collecting that. So, but when in the last couple of years, they've really tightened it up, and even people who had not paid the sales tax when they bought the airplane were now compelled to pay that, usually with penalties. So, and it's there's no mechanism like at the DMV when you buy a car and you re-register it. Since the aircraft are registered federally, there's no state mechanism that tracks the sale of aircraft. So it's pretty much left up to the buyer to know that, hey, I owe the state some money here. So it is 2% at the sales at the state level. The annual property tax has always been really interesting. That's done county by county, and usually whenever the counties get a new board of supervisor, enough new boards of supervisor in on the counties that have airports, one of them will get the great idea, hey, let's up the tax on those rich aircraft owners. And so when they, if that ever does go through and they up the tax, they find out that aircraft are a lot more mobile than cars are. People have to park their car in their garage in the county and don't have much choice. They don't have to park their aircraft in the same county. And so the aircraft will move to a county with lesser tax, especially the higher valued aircraft. But to be quite honest, at all of the airports that we're operating at right now, the tax rate is so low that they usually don't even bother sending a tax bill for each individual aircraft. It costs more for them to publish it and collect it than it does to just let it alone. But there is a registration fee that is, I think it's on the order of 10 or 15. It's some small amount per year. And that's where you get the little state decal that goes on the tail. And they usually do an aircraft census sometime in the early part of the year in January. So, yeah.
Just one quick comment on your how to shop. You might want to have people contact a broker who specialize the kind of aircraft they're interested in, right? Like Van Bortels for Cessnas, or self-serving here Lifestyle for Diamonds, and so on.
I was going to ask you, Dave, if you knew of any aircraft brokers that they could contact.
Right, because not only do we have our own inventory, but just like in real estate, you can hire what's called a buyer's broker. And, you know, just like in real estate, rather than you contacting the broker who represent each property you want to see, you can hire your own broker and they'll take and shop, you know, multiple houses, or in this case, multiple airplanes, to try and find the best one, you know, that fits your needs.
Yeah.
So consider brokers as well.
Point well taken. And as long as he's got his face on the screen up there, Dave is going to be on our next presentation next Tuesday, representing Lifestyle Aviation and Diamond Aircraft.
Thanks for the plug. We'll see you then.
Okay.
Question on Cessna 152. Do you have any interest in like a new Aviat Cessna 152?
Not really. What happened was when, from the time that they designed the 150 and the 152, which is about the same size airframe, Americans have gotten larger, and they don't fit so well in the 150s and 152s anymore. We have one on the line at Manassas, and it is the least flown airplane in our fleet. Any other questions?
Hey, Bob.
Okay, who we talking to?
Hey, this is Matt. Could you speak a little bit to
liability coverage, and do most owners put the aircraft into an LLC first before doing the lease back? And what is the extent of that liability for the owners and the school, I guess, for that matter?
Yes, that's an excellent question, Matt. The just about everybody puts the aircraft, forms an LLC. You can go online and form an LLC. I think it's $75 in the Commonwealth of Virginia to you know, the first time you do it, it's going to take you probably 25 minutes. The second time, 15 minutes. But it's really a pretty simple process to stand up the LLC. And then you do want to register it. It does provide what they call the corporate veil, which for liability purposes, that means that that Matt doesn't own the airplane, so they can't come directly after all of Matt's personal assets, that they would have to go through an LLC. Now, depending on the situation, you know, they can do what they call pierce the corporate veil. So that's what attorneys do, is they don't look to see when there's an accident or incident. It's not a matter of who's at fault. It's a matter of who's got money. And usually what determines who's got money is where's the insurance. So as far as based on that, I take kind of a minimalist approach to insurance. As far as liability, we carry what's pretty much the standard policy for flight schools, and that's they call it a million sub one. It's $1 million overall with $100,000 worth of coverage per person per incident, and that transfers the policy holder is jointly the flight school and the leasecraft or the leaseback aircraft owner. And so the policy is primarily in effect there. Any unused portion of the coverage, let's say it's a nasty accident that people are hurt on the ground, if the pilot gets sued, then any unused portion goes to help out the pilot, to defend the pilot. But you know, you could look at it and say that, you know, okay, what happens if you know, my aircraft is involved in an accident that, you know, takes out a busload of nuns? And you know, you can never insure yourself enough for that. So you could go into you could spend a lot of money buying coverage that the chances of ever using that are so infinitesimal that it's not worth looking at. There was one accident about, I think it was about 20 years ago, where a Bonanza up in New Jersey on Thanksgiving flew into the CFII, who was also a doctor, lost situational awareness, IMC, and went into a Kentucky Fried Chicken. That one accident skewed all of the statistics for that year. Just on, I think there were 7 or 8 people that were injured or killed on the ground. The chances of having an accident that hurts people on the ground and doing that damage with an airplane is very, very small, and lawsuits coming from accidents like that are next to non-existent. So does that answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, hi, this is Michael. Any interest in a 182? Do you think that would have some usage or demand?
Yes. Yes, we have a G1000 182 at Manassas, and we had one at Leesburg, and we'd like to have another one at Leesburg.
And then earlier you mentioned if you have 2 of the same, you generally expect the demand to go up for both?
For the, especially for the airplanes that are primary training airplanes. So certainly the 172s. One of the factors in the 152 not flying very much is it doesn't have a twin airplane. It doesn't have another one. So that is one of the reasons it doesn't fly as much. But having a similar like equipped airplane available, especially in the training fleet, does help.
And one last thing, do you know about the number of hours per month the 182s getting now?
I don't have those numbers. If you shoot me an email, I can certainly get it to you. Night Owl, NIGHTOWL at aviationadventures.com.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Bob, the 182 in Manassas did 300 hours during the year of 2019.
Okay, there you go. So 300.
300, okay. Thank
divided
you.
by 12.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, it sounds like 25 or so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what do you think, Gabe? Is it time to wrap it up?
Hey, that's your call, Bob. Yeah, it sounds good. This has been great, Bob. Thank you for taking us through this. Clearly, there was quite the demand. I think you and I should connect after maybe tomorrow, and we could talk about how to get that video to the others that couldn't watch the whole thing. So
I'll take any help I can get.
Hey, by the way, I'm not under 30. I'm not under 30 though, so I don't know if that'll disqualify me for that.
Okay, we make exceptions.
All right. No, thank you so much, Bob. This is great, and look forward to having another call next week.
I'd just like to remind everybody once again, the next Tuesday at we'll get the invites out both through Smokehouse and Aviation Adventures about the presentations by Cirrus and Diamond. We already got a little preview with Dave Passmore there. And then a week after that, on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo Day at 7 o'clock, we got Piper, Cessna, and Beechcraft. So those ought to be great presentations if you've got any interest now or in the future of buying a new aircraft.
Hey, Bob, it's Mark. For those that are interested to continue looking down this road of doing a lease back with us, how do you want everyone that's on this meeting to reach out to the team you put together as far as the lease back team?
You can put your phone number out there, Mark, or your email address.
What I'll do is I'll put my email address out there. There's 4 of us. I've got 8 years of leaseback experience, starting with the Quantico Flight Club, then over to Warrington for several years before Bob went out there, then down in Culpeper. So I've got a lot of war stories, both good and bad. Overall, very good. So if you got those questions of what it is to be a leaseback owner, I can answer a lot of those. My email address is going to be my last name spelled whiskey, India, Tango, Tango, Echo, first initial M as in Mike, at gmail.com. And feel free to get a hold of me, and we set up a steps to lease back. We got a rough draft guide to that. We can start walking you through it. And if you're interested, as we continue going down the road, then we'll help you through this process.
Hey, Mark, would you mind putting your email in the chat box down there for us? I'm going to grab it, if you don't mind.
Smart idea. I also put my phone number in there for anyone.
Perfect. Go ahead and get that. Thank you, Mark.
No worries.
All right. Thanks again, Gabe. Thanks to everybody who joined us on the meeting tonight. And Stay healthy out there.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Thanks,
Bob.
Bob.
Take care.